Shabbat Shalom, everyone. To those of you here at Temple Shalom, to those of you joining us on TempleShalom.com, and those of you joining us on YouTube as well. We turn in our Siddur to page 128. As we say the words, Hine ma tovu manayim, how good and wonderful it is, Shevet achim gam yachad, that all of us, brothers and sisters, are able to sit together. Hine ma tovu manayim, Shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tovu manayim, Shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov, Shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov, Shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov umanayim, Shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov umanayim, Shevet achim gam yachad. Right underneath those words of Hine ma tov, Ma yafeh hayom Shabbat Shalom. What a beautiful day it is, this day of Shabbat, this day of peace. Ma yafeh hayom Shabbat Shalom. 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 Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. We can turn back to page number 120 in our Siddur as we light our Shabbat candles. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. On page 130, we come to the Psalms of Kabalat Shabbat as we welcome in the time of peace, the time of remembrance, saying goodbye to the rest of the week and hello to this time of ceasing all that filled our minds and our activity for the week, and we take a time just to be in this space with our own souls, with God, and with this Shabbat. Lechu neranina, lechu neranina, lechu neranina l'Adonai. Lechu neranina, lechu neranina, lechu neranina l'Adonai. Naria, Naria, Litzuri Shenu, Lekadma Fana Bitoda. Naria, Naria, Litzuri Shenu, Mizmirot Nuriyalo, Lechuneranina, 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 Ladonai, Lechuneranina, 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 Ladonai. Psalm 96 tells us that all the earth should sing a new song to God, and praise God's name each and every day for God's salvation in the world. Shiru Ladonai, Shir Chadash. Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz. We sing that line first. Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz. Shiru Ladonai, Shir Chadash. Shiru, Shiru Ladonai. Shiru, Shiru Ladonai. Sing unto God all the earth a new song. I will sing unto God a new song. Sing unto God and we'll all sing along. All the earth a new song unto God. Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz. Shiru Ladonai, Shir Chadash. On page 132, right near the bottom of the page, Or Zarua La Tzadikul Yishrei Lev Simcha. Light is sown for the righteous, and for those who are straightforward of heart, they will have happiness. And so our reward for being righteous people and being good-hearted people is that we will have light and happiness. This weekend in Colorado Springs is Pride Weekend. Last night we had our interfaith pride blessing that kicked off the weekend of festivities. Two of us in the room were there. We were both there. Two of us were there. And we had a bunch of people sitting on the labyrinth in front of First Christian Church downtown in Colorado Springs with a lot of blessings, and those blessings were filled with righteousness. And those blessings were filled with good-heartedness. And because of those blessings, I think we have just a little bit more light and just a little bit more happiness in our world. Or Zarua La Tzadik, Yishrei Lev Simcha. 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 Yishrei Lev Simcha. Or Zarua La Tzadik, Yishrei Lev Simcha. Yishrei Lev Simcha. Lai 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 lai. Or Zarua La Tzadik, Yishrei Lev Simcha. Or Zarua La Tzadik, Yishrei Lev Simcha. From Psalm 98 on page 133, we'll read together in the English at the bottom of the page. A psalm. Sing to Adonai a new song, for God has worked wonders. God's right hand, God's holy arm has won God victory. Adonai has manifested God's victory, has displayed God's triumph in the sight of the nations. God was mindful of God's steadfast love and faithfulness toward the house of Israel. All the ends of the earth beheld the victory of our God. Raise a shout to Adonai, all the earth. Break into joyous songs of praise. Psalm 99 is one of those joyous psalms of praise. At the very end of the psalm, we say, Romemu Adonai Eloheinu, we exalt Adonai our God. V'hishtachavu lahar kodsho, when we prostrate ourselves, we bow down at God's holy mountain. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu, because Adonai our God is holy. And so we strive to make ourselves holy people. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu, the last three lines of Psalm number 99. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu, v'hishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu, v'hishtachavu lehar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu, v'hishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu, v'hishtachavu lehar kodsho. Psalm 29 on page 136 and 137 tells of God's power in the universe, God's power to do big things, shake mountains, God's power to do small things, to light and extinguish flames. We read Psalm 29 in English on both pages. A psalm of David, ascribe to Adonai, O divine beings, ascribe to Adonai glory and strength. Ascribe to Adonai the glory of God's name. Bow down to Adonai, majestic in holiness. The voice of Adonai is over the waters. The God of glory thunders, Adonai over the mighty waters. The voice of Adonai is power. The voice of Adonai is majesty. The voice of Adonai breaks cedars. Adonai shatters the cedars of Lebanon. God makes Lebanon skip like a calf, Sirion like a young wild ox. The voice of Adonai kindles flames of fire. The voice of Adonai convulses the wilderness. Adonai convulses the wilderness of Kadesh. The voice of Adonai causes hinds to calve and strips forests bare. While in God's temple all say glory. Adonai sat enthroned at the flood. Adonai sits enthroned sovereign forever. May Adonai grant strength to God's people. May Adonai bestow on God's people well-being. Those last two lines. In the Hebrew, Adonai oz le'amo yitain, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. Lai 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 Lai, 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 lai. Adonai oz le'amo, yitain, yitain. Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. Adonai oz le'amo, yitain, yitain. Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. Lai 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 lai. As we come to page 138 and 139, we welcome in the image of the Shabbat bride. In ancient times, 500 years ago or so, I guess that's kind of ancient for all of us, the mystics of Tzfat would go out into the fields and sing these words of this poem as they would bring in the image of the Shabbat bride, not only into the synagogue, but into the town and into the entire neighborhood. And so we welcome Shabbat with these words as well. On page 138, we'll sing verses 1 and 2, and 1 and 2, and on page 139, we'll sing verses 5 and 9. Lecha lecha dodi. Likrat likrat kala. Pnei pnei Shabbat nikabela. Lecha lecha dodi. Likrat likrat kala. Pnei pnei Shabbat nikabela la 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 lecha dodi. Likrat likrat kala. Pnei pnei Shabbat nikabela. Lecha lecha dodi. Likrat likrat kala. Pnei pnei Shabbat nikabela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad. Hishmi anu el hamiuchad. Adonai echad u'shemo echad. L'shem u'tiferet v'letchila la 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 la. Lecha dodi likrat likrat kala. Pnei pnei Shabbat nikabela. Lecha lecha dodi likrat likrat kala. Pnei pnei Shabbat nikabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha. Ki hi mekor habracha. Merosh mikedem nesucha. Sof ma'aseh b'machsheva tchila la 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 la. Lecha dodi likrat likrat kala. Pnei pnei Shabbat nikabela. Lecha lecha dodi likrat likrat kala. Pnei pnei Shabbat nikabela. Hit'oreri ki va'orech kumi uri uri shir daberi. Kivod Adonai alayich nigla la 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 la. Lecha dodi likrat likrat kala. Pnei pnei Shabbat nikabela. Lecha lecha dodi likrat likrat kala. Pnei pnei Shabbat nikabela. We rise, we come to verse number 9. We welcome in the image of the Shabbat bride as we face the door. Boi v'shalom ateret bala. Gam b'simcha uv'tzola. Toch emunei am segula. Boi chala la 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 la. Lecha dodi likrat likrat kala. Pnei pnei Shabbat nikabela. Lecha lecha dodi likrat likrat kala. Pnei pnei Shabbat nikabela la 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 la. Lecha dodi likrat likrat kala. Pnei pnei Shabbat nikabela. Lecha lecha dodi likrat likrat kala. Pnei pnei Shabbat nikabela. Before you sit down, you can greet the people around you. We welcome in the Shabbat bride. We'll welcome each other. And while the people in the synagogue are welcoming each other, I'd like to say to all of you that are joining us on TempleShalom.com and on our Temple Shalom YouTube page, Shabbat Shalom to all of you as well. And welcome to another beautiful Friday evening. On page 140, a psalm of Shabbat, Mizmor Shir Liyom HaShabbat. Come, let us sing a song of Shabbat. It is good to sing of God's name most high and to give thanks to God for this beautiful Shabbat. Mizmor Shir Liyom HaShabbat, Tov lehodod la'Adonai. ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני. ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. להגיד בבוקר חסדך, ואמונתך בלילות. עלי עשור ועלינה ולעלי היגיון וכינור. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני. ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. כי שימחתני אדוני בפועלך, במעשה ידיך ארני. מה גדלו מעשיך אדוני, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. We move into our Ma'ariv service as we turn to page 144 for Chatzi Kaddish. Yitkada v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, Belmad yivrach Yerutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uvyomechon, u'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala ba'agala, ובזמן קריב יאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם עולם מעלמיה יתברך. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם וינשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה בין כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, Damiron be'alma v'yimeru. Amen. On page 146, we'll find the Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu is a prayer of welcoming. It's a prayer that says, in a more poetic way and in a more liturgical way than I'm going to say it right now, the leader of the service says, "Hey everybody, are you ready to pray?" And everybody responds with, "Yes, we're ready to pray." And then the leader responds with, "Good, I'm glad you're ready to pray, let's pray." That's the not so poetic version of it. The poetic and liturgical version are the words of Baruch Hu here on page 146. The idea of welcoming is a big idea of this weekend of Pride Weekend in Colorado Springs. The idea that everybody should be welcome, no matter where we go, whether it's into a synagogue or a church or a mosque, whether it's into a hospital or a restaurant or a business, whether it's in school or at work, whether it's among family or among friends or among community. And so as we rise now, you're allowed to rise now. If you're at home, you can rise now too. We welcome everyone as we use these words of Baruch Hu in welcome. There's a question that was asked. There's a tradition now among some synagogues in the Reform movement that they say something that it's a sense of welcoming, and they always say, instead of saying, "Would you please rise?" they say, "If you are able, please rise." I never say that, and I'll tell you why I don't say that. 'Cause I think everybody is able to rise. Many of us physically, but some of us who are not physically able to rise, we're able to rise emotionally. We can rise spiritually. We can rise psychologically. And so, as we rise, the majority of us rise physically, but hopefully we rise in those other ways as well. And for those of us who don't physically rise, I hope we find the way of raising our souls and raising our consciousness as, again, we in many ways rise for Baruch Hu on page 146. Lai la lai 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 lai. Lai la lai 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 lai. Lai la lai 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 lai. Lai la lai 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 lai. Lai la lai 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 lai. Lai la lai 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 lai. Lai la lai 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 lai. Lai la lai 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 lai. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach. Mevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Mevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Adonai Mevorach Le'olam Va'ed. We can be seated as we turn to page 148. On 148, we have prayer Ma'ariv Aravim. We say thank you for creation, for all the things that you created in the evening, the moon and the stars and the darkness, for all the things that were created in the daytime for the light. For all of creation, for all the things that we see each day and for all the things that we don't see each day. For changing the seasons from one to the other. Most people I know have a favorite season, but they still are okay with the other three. Because God changes from one to the other and changes the times for us. And as we change through those times, we can give praise for every last little bit of God's creation. Ma'ariv Aravim, page 148. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim. B'chokhmah poteach sharim, u'v'tvuna mishaneh itim, u'machalif et hazmanim, u'misater et hakochavim. Umishmerotehem barakia kirtzono. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Bore yom velayla golel or mipnei choshech, choshech mipnei or. Uma'avir yom umevi layla, umavdil ben yom uvein layla. Adonai tzivaot shemo. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. El chai v'kayam tamid yimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Ha'ma'ariv Aravim. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Praise to you, Adonai, the one who brings on the evening. Page 150. We give thanks for Torah, for its laws, for its statutes, for its pathways through life. Each and every one of its words, we say that they are chayenu, they're our life. The orech yameinu, and the length of our days. Praised are you, O God, who shows love to your people Israel by giving us your Torah, by letting us interpret its words in old ways and in new ways, each and every day of our lives. Ahavat olam, Beit Yisrael, Amcha ahavta, Amcha ahavta. Torah u'mitzvot, Chukim u'mishpatim, Otanu limadita, Otanu limadita. Al Kin Adonai Eloheinu b'shofteinu v'kumenu nasiach b'chukecha v'nismach b'divrei toratecha u'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed. Ki hein chayeinu ve'orech yameinu uvahem nehege yomam ve'layla, nehege yomam ve'layla. Ve'avatcha al tasir mimenu le'olamim, Baruch atah Adonai ohev amo Yisrael, ohev amo Yisrael. For those of you who are here in the sanctuary and have a copy of our supplemental prayers, if you'll turn to page number 1, it's stapled in the upper left, kind of like an English book, because that's what the stapler did for us today. If you go to page number 1, for Shema and Vahafta will be on that page, including a translation, a poetic translation that we'll read together. But first we'll chant the Hebrew, and then I'll tell you a little bit about where this translation comes from. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto le'olam va'ed, ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol meodecha, ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom alevavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'veitecha uv'lechtecha v'derech uv'shochbecha uv'kumecha uv'kshartam le'ot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot be'einecha uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvish arecha. The translation that we'll read together in the English at the bottom of page 1 in our supplement comes from a congregation called Congregation Beth Chaim Chadashim. Congregation Beth Chaim Chadashim is in Los Angeles, California, and it is originated as an LGBTQ plus congregation several decades ago. When the congregation first started, most of the congregation was LGBTQ except for one key person, the rabbi. Because at the time when it started, the idea of a rabbi who was out in the community was not an acceptable idea. Now the rabbi there is a member of the LGBTQ community, and the various rabbis who've been through this congregation over its years of existence have become leaders of the Jewish community in Los Angeles, presidents of the Board of Rabbis in Los Angeles, and writers of liturgy. And so we read together from one of the rabbis in the history of Beit Chaim Chadashim, a translation of the words, a poetic translation, and an inspiring one, I think, of the words that we just chanted, the words that came from the book of Deuteronomy, these words coming from the poet, the rabbi, and the translator. Hear, O Israel, just as God is one, so are we. Just as you shall love your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might, so shall you love all people. Teach love, compassion, and understanding to your children. When you sit in your home, while you walk on your way, when you retire, and when you arise. Bind these words as a sign upon your arms so that you may fight against prejudice, between your eyes so that you may not be blind to the suffering of others, and write them on the doorposts of your homes and gates so that you remind yourself and others that intolerance will not be tolerated within these walls. We continue in our Siddur as we make our way to page 158. Moses, Miriam, all of the Israelites stood before the sea. They prayed for freedom from slavery, physical slavery in Egypt. In Hebrew, we call that Mitzrayim. That's the Hebrew word for Egypt. They wanted freedom from slavery in Egypt and wanted to go to a place which would be our house of Yisrael, the place where we struggle with God, because that's how we find peace, is we struggle with God to find our pathways toward a place, like Beit Shalom, a house of peace. This was what happened in ancient times with our ancestors, but in modern times, we also strive to leave slavery and make our way toward freedom. And we leave our Mitzrayim. And when we remember that Mitzrayim means narrow places, we remember that we leave our slavery of narrow places, our slavery of our own narrow-mindedness, and the slavery of other people's narrow-mindedness, so that we can leave that place of slavery and come to a place where we can be Yisrael, the one who struggles with God, so that we can find our Beit Shalom, our house of peace, our Eretz, our land that is our land of freedom. And so, like Moses, like Miriam, like our ancestors, the Israelites said, we sing these words as they did at the sea, these words of Michamocha, who is like you, O God, among the gods that are worshipped? Who is like you that could deliver us to freedom? You are majestic, you are holy, you are splendorous, and your works are wondrous. Michamocha. Yai lai 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 yai lai 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 yai lai 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 yai lai 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 Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai Mi chamocha ne'edar b'kodesh Nora tehilot osei fele Nora tehilot osei fele מלכותך ראו בניך, חוקי הים לפני משה ומרים, זה אלי ענו ואמרו, זה אלי ענו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. Yai lai 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 yai lai 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 yai lai 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 yai lai 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 yai lai 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 ונאמר כי בראי את יעקב Goalo miad chazak mimenu. Baruch atah Adonai Go'al Yisrael. Page 160. O God, lie us down in peace. Cause us to rise again tomorrow to life, and spread over us a shelter of your peace. Guard our coming and our going, now and for always. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'hamidenu shomrenu l'chayim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'hamidenu shomrenu l'chayim. The three lines that are indented in the Hebrew. Ushmor tzitenu Uvoinu L'chaim u'shalom Me'etah ve'ad olam. Yai la lai 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 la lai, yai la lai 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 la lai, lai 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 lai, lai lai la lai, lai la lai 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 la lai, lai la lai 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 la lai. Lai la lai 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 lai, lai lai la lai. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'hamidenu shomrenu l'chayim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'hamidenu shomrenu l'chayim. Shomrenu l'chayim, Shomrenu l'chayim. Baruch atah Adonai Aporei sukat shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim. Lai la lai 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 la lai, lai la lai 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 la lai, lai la lai 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 lai, lai 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 lai. The people of Israel will keep Shabbat. Observing Shabbat throughout the ages is a covenant for all time. It is a sign for all time, God said, between me and the people of Israel. For in 6 days God created out of nothing the heavens and the earth. And on the seventh day, God Shabbated, it's a verb, God ceased from everything. And God nefeshed, that's also a verb. God refreshed God's soul. And so we Shabbat and we nefesh, we cease everything. We refresh our souls as this covenant to remember creation. At the top of page 162. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lasot et ha-Shabbat lidorotam berit olam. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lasot et ha-Shabbat lidorotam berit olam. Ben Yuvein b'nei Yisrael oti leolam. Oti leolam. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lasot et ha-Shabbat lidorotam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. As we come to our Amidah, which in your Siddur begins on page 164, but I'm going to have you turn ahead to page 168, because that's where we're going to continue in our Siddur after we use our supplement. If you turn to your Pride Shabbat supplement on page number 2. And before we rise for the Amidah, a little bit of an explanation, because you're going to notice a difference in this Amidah from the Amidah that we do on a regular basis here at Temple Shalom. If you look in the Hebrew on line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if you look at the English also on line 5, you'll see that in addition to the names that you're used to, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, that's what we're used to seeing. We've added in the words Elohei Bilha, Elohei Zilpah, God of Bilha and God of Zilpah. Who are Bilha and Zilpah? I mean, we know Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They're pretty famous in our Torah portion. We know their wives, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. And we should know Zilpah and Bilha. Bilha and Zilpah are handmaidens to Rachel and Leah. And they are mothers to most of the 12 tribes, as opposed to Rachel and Leah. But tradition says that they're not part of the covenant of Abraham, and so they're left out of our prayer. There's a tradition that began in many places and has become prominent at Congregation Beit Simchat Torah, which is in New York. It's the largest LGBTQ synagogue in the entire world. And at their synagogue, they include every Shabbat and every time they pray, Bilha and Zilpah. The explanation is this: why should we add Bilha and Zilpah into our prayer? Some people say, well, why would we change the prayer? Well, we already did, right? We added in Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, who in the Talmudic version of this prayer don't exist in the prayer. It's only Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But to be inclusive of women, we added in Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. But we still have an issue in our world of inclusion. And we kind of push the outsider, the outcast, to the side. We say, all right, we'll include you. The you, I mean, is the short list of you that we like. The bigger list of you, we'll have to think about it, because you're an outsider. You're not part of the tribe. Bilha and Zilpah were outsiders, not part of the tribe. But it tells us in Pirkei de Rabbi Nachman, in Pirkei de Rabbi Nathan, Pirkei de Rabbi Nathan, it says that there's a thought that perhaps Bilha and Zilpah were cousins, or maybe stepsisters, or maybe half-sisters to Rachel and Leah. But they were still considered outsiders, not part of the covenant. How could that be? They were the birth mothers of most of the 12 sons of Jacob. And so, how could their children be part of the covenant and they not be part of the covenant? They represent the outsider who's really not an outsider, who really is an insider, because all of us are insiders. All of us are part of the tribe. And so to represent those who have been left out, those who have been ignored, those who have not been thought of, those are all descriptions of Bilhah and Zilpah in our normal discussions of our ancestry. We include them in this Amidah. We'll chant the first paragraph from page 2 of our supplement. Then we will read the translation from Beit Simchat Torah congregation in New York. And after that, we'll continue on page 168 in our prayer books, and we'll come a little later to the supplement for Modim that's on page 3. But now we all rise physically, spiritually, emotionally as we come to our Amidah. Page 2 of our supplement. Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips and my mouth will declare your glory. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Elohei Bil'ah, Elohei Zilpah. Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'konei Hakol, V'zocher Chaste Avot v'Imahot, Umevi Geula Livnei V'nehem, Leman Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Ozer Umoshia Umagen, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, Ufoked Sarah. O God, open my lips that I may declare your praise. We are grateful to life's eternal spirit, our origin, and the God of our ancestors, the vision and promise of Abraham, the steadfastness of Isaac, the spiritual wrestling of Jacob, the strength of Sarah, the wisdom of Rebekah, the patience of Rachel, the loyalty of Leah, the kindness of Bilhah, and the soulfulness of Zilpah. Expansive, powerful, awesome, supreme God, you love and kindnesses. You are the ultimate honor of everything. When you remember our ancestors caring with your concern for their descendants' future fulfillment, with love for the sake of creation. You are a ruler, our saving power, and our helper. We bless you, Holy One, guardian of our ancestors. Ata gibor le'olam Adonai, mechaye hakol ata rav lehoshia, morid hatal, mechalkel chayim bechesed, mechaye hakol berachamim rabim, somech noflim verofeh cholim, umatir asurim, Umekayim emunato b'shenei afar micha mocha ba'al givurot umido melach melech meimit umechaye umatzmiach Yeshua v'ne'eman ata lachayot hakol baruch ata Adonai mechaye hakol. 170 Ata kadosh u'shimcha kadosh Ukadoshim b'chol yom yahalelucha selah. Baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh. 172 or 173 in the Hebrew or the English. We continue silently with Hebrew or English, or through on page 80 and 181, or our own silent prayers. Please be seated when you finish your prayers. You can turn in your Siddur to 176 or go to page 3 in your Pride Shabbat supplement. Either one of those will work for these words that we sing in our Modim prayer. The Modim prayer says, we give thanks to you, our God, that you are our God and the God of our ancestors. And we are your people Israel. You are our God forever, and we are your people Israel forever. The first 3 lines of the Hebrew are the lines that we sing here. Modim anachnu lach she'ata hu Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avoteinu v'imotenu le'olam va'ed. Sur chayeinu magin yisheinu atahu ledor vador, atahu ledor vador. Modim anachnu lach she'ata hu Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avoteinu v'imotenu le'olam va'ed. Sur chayeinu magin yisheinu atahu ledor vador, atahu ledor vador. There's a tradition in the Amidah of adding in other prayers of thanks during this prayer of Modim. That we read the official prayer in the Siddur, but then we also add things in. If you look on page 176 in your Siddur, you'll see that there's a thank you for Hanukkah in this section. And we add in, at other times, other prayers of thanks, because this is a prayer of thanks. On this occasion of Pride Shabbat, at Congregation Beit Chaim Chadashim in Los Angeles, they add in this extra bit of giving thanks that we'll read together on page 3 of your Pride Shabbat supplement. In the days before Stonewall, many Jews were among those who felt the sting of homophobia and biphobia, who suffered from misunderstanding and rejection by family and Jewish community. But you, Creator of us all, stood firm, reminding us what happened on the 6th day of creation. Vayivra Elohim et ha'adam b'tzalmo, b'tselem Elohim bara oto, zachar u'nikeva bara otam. And God created the human in God's image. In the image of God was it created. Male and female, God created them. Until many came to understand that you do not create in vain, do not create without intent. Until many of us came to understand that we too are part of your design, loved equally by you. And the more we have learned and understood, the more has pride returned to our spirit, and the more our spirits have turned to you. We pray for the day when Kol HaNishama Tehalel Yah, when all spirits, every soul that breathes shall praise you and admire your diverse creations. This is a Pride Shabbat. Some years ago, a decade, something like that, I had maybe half a decade, I had the gift of being in New York City for Pride and of attending Friday night services at Congregation Beit Simchat Torah. Well, it wasn't at Congregation Beit Simchat Torah because their building's not big enough to house the community when there's Pride. They rented out the Masonic Hall of New York, a much bigger building where every single seat was filled. And I learned something that I didn't know until that day, that in the world of Congregation Beit Simchat Torah, there are 3 high holidays: Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Pride. And on Pride, they read this addition to the Amidah as well. It's Al Hanisim. Now, Al Hanisim is a special prayer that we add to the Amidah for Hanukkah and for Purim. Hanukkah, where we were almost wiped out, but we survived. Purim, where we were almost wiped out, but we survived. And Pride, represented around the time of, well, that Stonewall riot, where some of us were almost wiped out, but survived. And so for that survival, we say these words that were written by Rabbi Ayelet Cohen, who at the time she wrote them was one of the rabbis at Congregation Beit Simchat Torah in New York. She and her husband still live in New York, but she's no longer one of the rabbis there. As of July 1st, 2022, she is now the dean of the rabbinical school of the conservative movement in New York. She wrote these words. Al Hanisim, it begins with these traditional words. Al Hanisim va'al ha'porkan va'al ha'gvurot va'al ha'tshot va'al ha'milchamot sh'asita la'avotenu v'ledorotenu b'ayamim hahem b'zman hazeh. We thank you for the miracles, the liberations, the heroism, the triumphs that you brought to our ancestors in those days at these seasons. Bimei hatznua lezichuyot ve'ezrach ba'Amerika. Kama kihilah ha-ge'im. That's how you say the gay community in Hebrew. Kihilat, community of ha-ge'im. I know it doesn't sound beautiful and pretty, but that's the Hebrew, and there it is. Kama arose. Kama kihilat ha-ge'im. V'hilchem al ha-kibud v'hatzedek v'ha-megi'im l'kol b'nei hanuvot enosh b'shem machalalei shemecha. B'ta'anatam shehem son'im b'shem Adonai amdu neged banecha uvenotecha lahashpilam v'le'esram v'lahashmidam v'limchakam uvrachamecha harabim v'amadat lahem ba'et sarata v'ravta et ribam dinta et dinam Chizachta et libam la'amor biyachad, lifkod et einehem ve'et einei ha'olam, lahavin shahachiru lahazkud le'ehov, sheyachot kol ha'yitzurotecha, hizakta utam ve'otanu kedei, shenuchal lir'ot nifla'ot la'asot nis'im, lehiot asher nihyeh V'le'ehov et mi shene'ehav lo b'tzel gvrenu ele be'or ha'chayim l'chayot ki Yehudim b'chek ha'kehilah l'kadesh et achidenu l'sis elenu v'yalecha even ma'asu habonim ta rosh pina v'lo nevosh v'lo nikalem Le'olam va'ed. In the wake of the civil rights movement, lesbians and gay men, bisexuals and trans people began to organize for the dignity of justice each is due as human beings on this earth. Those who profane your name, claiming that they hate us in the name of God, rose up to criminalize us, pathologize us, brutalize us, and erase us. And you, in your great mercy, stood with us in the time of our troubles. You fought alongside us, vindicated us, giving us the courage to stand together, to open our eyes and the eyes of the world around us, to see that the freedom and the right to love belongs to all of your creations. You have given us the strength to witness and create wonders, to be who we are and to love whom we love. not only in the safety of our home, but outside in the light of the world. To live as Jews in the embrace of the community, to sanctify our unions and celebrate ourselves before each other and before you. The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone, the Torah tells us. May we never know shame again. I've been asked why Pride Shabbat at Temple Shalom. Frankly, I've been criticized why Pride Shabbat at Temple Shalom. I've been cursed why Pride Shabbat at Temple Shalom. Okay, so I've been asked and criticized and cursed, so I'll answer the question. Why Pride Shabbat at Temple Shalom? Because Temple Shalom is a welcoming community, and we need to teach the world how to be a welcoming community. And in asking the question, why Pride Shabbat, we step away from being a welcoming community just by asking the question. I've been told that, Rabbi, don't you know that in the Torah it forbids homosexuality? It doesn't. I still have a standing offer. $1 million cash immediately to anybody who can show me in the Torah where it says homosexuality is forbidden. I will hand anybody $1 million cash if they can show me that. And then they show me Leviticus chapter 18, verse 22, and Leviticus chapter 20, verse 13, where it says, if a man lies with a man, it is an abomination. And they say, there you go. And I say, no. That says if a man lies with a man, it's an abomination. If you interpret that to be homosexuality, that's called an interpretation, not what's written in the Torah. And in the Jewish world, we have many interpretations of things. And there are those in the Jewish world who interpret that as a ban on homosexuality, and that is an interpretation. There's another interpretation that says it's a ban on sexual relations with minor boys. There's another interpretation that says it's in a section of the Torah that says we're supposed to separate ourselves from the people who are not the Jewish communities, but there are other communities around us. And then there are those who tell me that we can't change the law because it's in the Torah and it's eternal. And I say, well, guess what? We can change the Torah. And they say, you're a rabbi, you can't change the Torah. And I say, like I will to you today, God changed the Torah in the middle of the Torah. And the rabbis in the Talmud changed the Torah in the middle of the Talmud. And we continue to change the Torah today because we in the Talmud, which is the oral law given on Mount Sinai by God to Moses, have permission to change the Torah. Not permission to change everything in the Torah, but to sometimes change the Torah if that helps make the world a better place. In the Torah, we have the story in this week's Torah portion of Pinchas. Pinchas is the grandson of Aaron, going to be the priest. He finds this guy Zimri. He's having sexual relations with a Moabite priestess or woman, whoever it is, and in the tabernacle or outside the tabernacle or wherever it may be. And then in the Talmud, they say it was once, it was 60 times, it was 100 times. He brought other people with him, and they were having sex with the Moabite. But Pinchas sees him and takes a sword and stabs through Zimri and through the woman as well, while they're in the act, and kills both of them. We have a word for that in the Torah. It's called murder, and you're not allowed to do it. But in that moment, God changed the Torah and told Moses, Pinchas will not be punished because, yes, he broke the Torah law, but he did it for a reason to save the Israelite people and make the world a better place. A little later in our Torah portion this week, Zelophehad dies. His daughters, his 5 daughters, interestingly, we know their names. A lot of women in the Torah, we don't know their names. But Zelophehad's daughters, Machlah, Noah, and Hoglah, and Milcah, and Tirzah, they say the inheritance that we would get from our father, there's no brothers, so we will lose our inheritance what will we have? And Moses goes to God and says, what do we do? And God says, well, we change the law of inheritance that's already in the Torah, that the male children get the inheritance, and if not, then the closest male relative, first cousin, second cousin, uncle, whoever it may be, gets the inheritance. We're going to change the Torah right now in the Torah so that the women can inherit. And then a little later on, they're told, after some complaints from the men, that they're only allowed to marry within the tribe of Manasseh. And so it's taken back a little bit, but progress sometimes happens just a little bit at a time. And we need to know that as well. There are laws against what we in English we call the bastard son, right? And we have laws against the rebellious son. We have laws against cities that engage in idol worship. By the way, the penalty for all of those, death, never given. And the rabbis in the Talmud use their creative logic to figure out how not to use those penalties. You can read all about it in the book of Sanhedrin in the Talmud. Page 71a is a good place to start. Elijah met with 250 prophets of the god Baal and wanted to prove that the Jewish God was greater than the other gods. And so they were on a hillside in Haifa, and the Torah says you may only make a sacrifice to God on the altar in the tent of meeting in the desert or in the temple in Jerusalem. But Elijah made a sacrifice on that mountain in Haifa. And as it turned out, the sacrifices to Baal were wiped away by a fire, and there's a whole story about it. But Elijah broke the Torah law to save the Jewish people. Boaz in the book of Ruth, in his time, it was said that you must greet people with God's name in your greeting to them. Blessed you be in the name of God coming here. It says you can't use the name of God in vain. And using God's name outside of prayer is using God's name in vain, according to that rabbinic interpretation. And the rabbi said, no, they're bringing holiness to each other by using God's name in a greeting. This is what God would want. So we can overrule the Torah that says we can't use God's name in vain. The Torah says that there's a Shemitah year, that every 7 years we let the land lie fallow, and that we're supposed to release people from loans that we've given to them. Well, in the last year before the thing, nobody would give anybody a loan. Why would I give you a 7-year loan if the loan's going to get taken away in only 2 months? I'm not going to get my money back. I'm not going to make anything on the loan. What's this? So Rabbi Hillel in the Talmud came up with a program where you could sell the loan to a banker, and the bank would hold on to the loan and collect the interest on the loan, and then after the Shemitah year, it would come back to you and your money would be safe. Hillel overruled the Torah. And so if we want to say that the interpretation of those 2 sentences in Leviticus is that homosexuality is forbidden, I'll disagree with you. But if you say that's your interpretation, I will say, in the spirit of Elijah, and in the spirit of Boaz, and in the spirit of Rabbi Hillel, and in the spirit of God, God's self, in the Torah with Zelophehad's daughters and Pinchas who killed Zimri, we can overrule the Torah to make the world a better place, to make the world a place filled with love instead of hate. Rashi tells us that we're allowed to do it. When he's talking about Psalm 119, it says in the Psalm, it is time to work for the Lord. They have made void your Torah. But Rashi says, really, the way we should read this is that it says that we can transgress the words of Torah. This is from Rashi, the greatest Talmudic commentator of all time. We may transgress the words of the Torah in order to make a fence to safeguard the Jewish people. And we have Jewish people who are part of the LGBTQ community that need some safeguarding. And so we can transgress the words of Torah to make a fence that keeps them safe. Rabbi Natan in Brachot 45a in the Talmud says, we can read it differently. We can say, make void your Torah, because it is time to do the work of God, because occasionally one of the great Talmudic rabbis, tells us it is necessary to negate biblical precepts in order to lift up the Torah. And so, this is what we do on this Pride Shabbat. Why Pride Shabbat, Temple Shalom? Because we need to be in that occasion of negating biblical precepts so that we can lift up the Torah. So that we can lift up the Torah precepts of chesed, kindness, mishpat, justice, and tzedek, righteousness. And when we do, we make the world a much brighter place. Those of you who are watching us on templeshalom.com and YouTube, you're not going to see me for the next couple of minutes because I'm going to walk in that direction, but you'll hear me, I promise. And as we bring that brightness into the world, we bring that brightness into the world in many colors. Perhaps a rainbow of colors, as they call it at Congregation Beit Simchat Torah in New York, the Pride National Anthem. Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly, birds fly over the rainbow. Why then, oh, why can't I? Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops way above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly, birds fly over the rainbow. Why then, oh, why can't I? If happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow, why, oh, why can't I? As we turn in our Siddur to page 371, we think of all those who are in need of healing. We ask for God to bring refuah shlema, complete healing, to Carrie Susser, Brian Zabel, Ruvain ben Tzipora, Moshe ben Avraham, Avraham ben Meir, Judy Bauman, Avram ben Odul, Ellen McIntosh, John Rubin Palmer, Susan Perry, Paltiela bat Mordechai Vavasha, William Redmond Palmer, Amy Sutton, Perry Bach, Gladys Korn, Rachel Nechama bat Bracha, Grace Potter, Harriet Neal, John Scheck, Faye Green, June Mayer, Steve Listener, Howard Chook, Joel Weiss, and Linda Kraft. Do we have other names that anybody would like to include in the congregation today? Thank you. Any others? For all those we've named, for all those who are suffering from the COVID-19 virus, on page 371, we sing together. Mi sheberach avotenu mikor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mi sheberach imotenu mikor habracha leavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. As we turn in our Siddur, page 586, at the bottom of the page, we rise for Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, latet gdula liyotzeh bereshit, shelo asanu kugoyei ha'aratzot, velo samanu ki mishpechot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam, va'anachnu korim, umishtachavim umodim, lifnei melech malchei hamlachim, hakadosh baruch hu, shehu notei shamayim ve'yoser haaretz, umoshav yikaro b'shamayim mima'al, ushchinatu zo, begov he meromim, hu Eloheinu ein od, emet malkeinu efes zulato, kakatuv b'torato, yadata hayom v'ashevota elevavecha, ki Adonai hu Elohim, v'shamayim ima'al, ve'al ha'aretz, mitachat ein od, ki ha'malchut shelcha hi olam yimloch bechavod, kakatuv b'toratecha Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed, v'ne'emar v'ya Adonai melech al kol ha'aretz, bayom hahu ye Adonai echad, ushemo echad, ushemo echad. We can be seated. As we turn to page 598 in our Siddur, we recall the yard sites, the memories of Jenny Peterman, Louise Mendelson, Philip Weeding, Ronald Schultz, Eva Parker, Jim Colvin, Louis Waldbaum, Richard Lewis, Sophie Cohen, Edward Dymek, Julius Albert, Adeline Davidson, Ann Suskin, Elaine Sherman, Rachel Grubstein, Khila Rahmani, Irving Milgram, Getta Weiss, Dora Waldbaum, Ellie Schellist, Francis Karp, George Charney, Jeanette Lanton, Leo Orenstein, Marion Waxman, Pearl Heller, Bernard Kaufman, Esther Geller, Tulio Volovis Gordon. We also recall the memories of all those who have died in the COVID-19 pandemic here in the United States and around the world. We are also in the period of Shloshim for Calvin Waxman, and I know that we have some of the family, Calvin's family, with us on templeshalom.com and on YouTube, and we welcome you as well. We ask mourners to rise and those whose custom it is to stand with them, as in their memory we sanctify God's name. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chaye echon u'vyom echon u'chaye d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agalav v'zman kari v'imru amen. Yehe shmei Rabbah mevorach leolam l'olmei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudisha brichu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata, d'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehe shalama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. We can all be seated. In your Siddur, you can turn to page 645. 645, right in the middle of the page. A quote from Pirkei Avot, chapter 2, that says, Lo alecha hamalacha ligmor. You don't have to finish the work. V'lo ata ben chorin lehibitel mimena. But neither are you free to ignore the work. On this Pride Shabbat, we know there's a lot of work to do to fix our world. And we don't have to finish that, but we do have to participate in the work to lead in that direction. I'll sing it through. We've sung it here at Temple Shalom before. If you don't know it, you can listen to the words. I'll sing it slowly. It goes like this. Lo alecha hamalacha ligmor. Lo alecha ligmor. Try just that much. Lo alecha hamalacha ligmor. Lo alecha ligmor. Try it again. Lo alecha hamalacha ligmor. Lo alecha ligmor. The second half goes like this. Velo ata ben chorin lehibatel mimena. Velo ata ben chorin. Velo ata ben chorin lehibatel mimena. Velo ata ben chorin. That's the whole song. We don't have to complete the work, but we're also not given permission to ignore it. We have to at least get it started. Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor. Lo alecha ligmor. Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor. Lo alecha ligmor. Velo ata ben chorin lehibatel bimena. Velo ata ben chorin. Velo ata ben chorin lehibatel bimena. Velo ata ben chorin. I think you've got it, so we're going to sing it one more time. at the speed that the songwriter actually wrote the song, because it's a joyful song that we're going to get started on the work of fixing the things in our world. Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, lo alecha ligmor, lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, lo alecha ligmor, velo ata ben chorin lehibatel imena, velo ata ben chorin, velo ata ben chorin lehibatel imena, velo ata ben chorin. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. To those of you joining us on TempleShalom.com and on our YouTube channel, we say Shabbat Shalom and Laila Tov to all of you. Just a couple of quick announcements. Maybe we'll make those. I forgot about a couple announcements. First of all, thank you all for being here. Please know that our Pride Shabbat continues tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m. with reading Parashat Pinchas. We will meet on Sunday, July 24th, 10:15, near the corner of Monument and Tejon, space B56. It's on our Facebook page. That's where our contingent to the Pride Parade is going to be. July 29th, the final Shabbat of the month, the fifth Friday of the night, fifth Friday of July. We don't have this all the time. It's Ask the Rabbi Shabbat. You can come and ask about anything you've wondered about. I'll give you all the answers because I know all the answers. Or I'll make up a really good sounding answer and then I'll look up the answer and tell you the real answer later. Please join us on August 10th. Senior lunches. It's the best lunch deal in town. And we have entertainment on Wednesday, August 10th. The Wonders of Jane. Jane is a member of Temple Shalom, Jane Perry, who is just a fabulous magician. I know because I've been to the show. And Jane is great. I'm going to be there on that day. You don't have to be a senior to come. It's a cheap kosher lunch. You can come on that day. It's fabulous. Please be there. Please make sure you join us for our 50th anniversary on September 10th, 6:30 p.m. Ron Ivory and his Motown tribute band will be here. Will you be here? I'll be here. I might even sing with the band because that might be fun. And make sure all your information in the directory is good. So I think that's it. Thank you to all of you who are here. Thank you to Beth Zimmerman and Lisa Sherwood who have been our ushers this evening. And if you want to sponsor an oneg, let us know. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. To you on camera again, Laila Tov, Shabbat Shalom for all of you here. Kiddush Motzi in the back of the room. We'll see you momentarily. Shabbat Shalom. Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, lo alecha ligmor, lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, lo alecha ligmor, velo ata ben chorin lehibatel mimena, velo ata ben chorin la 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 la, velo ata ben chorin lehibatel mimena, velo ata ben chorin